Really appreciate everybody making some time to talk about my favorite topic, roadmaps. I'm going to give you a few slides to walk you through my thoughts, and then we should have some time for questions afterward. Let me start up my slides, and hopefully you can see that. Are we seeing one slide now, I hope? Okay, let's talk about it. The reason I'm saying that roadmaps are dead and long-lived roadmaps is, well, honestly, roadmaps are pretty controversial. They seem to get a lot of us product people into trouble. And as an industry, in fact, we have a not a great track record of predicting the future, which is kind of what a roadmap is an attempt to do, right? It's an attempt to predict the future. Google is famous for shutting down products if they don't meet expectations. And I even did a Google search for canceled products. And I got this whole helpful crawl of images of dead products from Google itself of all sorts, hardware, software, you name it. Um, and I think that that's emblematic of the industry as a whole. The Standish Group does a study every couple of years about software development and tech projects, and their data suggests that half or more of features that we as an industry ship are seldom or never used. And that strikes me as not a very good hit rate, not a very good success rate. And so I over the course of my career have continually asked myself, why do we make the wrong things? Why do we have such a poor success rate of shipping things that actually work for customers and for businesses? I mean, we know the lean startup movement has taught us that we're supposed to build, measure, and learn, right? We're supposed to go in this iterative cycle. And so we should be quickly learning what it is that matters to customers and correcting course and building the right thing. But if you think about it, we don't most of the time, even though we all know this, we don't operate like that. We operate more like this, right? We build and ship and build and ship and build and ship some more, never pausing to really learn from what it is that we've built and whether it's really working for customers and whether it's really engaging for customers before we move on to the next thing. Um, this has resulted in a kind of an allergy, I think, among product people for roadmaps. And there's this whole litany of articles about why roadmaps are a train wreck, or why road mapping sucks, and why you shouldn't be a roadmap first team. And of course, by the way, you should use our other proprietary planning methodology so as you not to waste time. I think the frustration that I experienced and that lots of product people are expressing about doing roadmaps seem best typified by this quote from David Cancel, CEO of Boston area company Drift and former head of product for HubSpot, also a Boston area company. He said basically, roadmaps are a no-win scenario, and that's why he says he doesn't do them. Either I'm going to tell you at a point in time what I plan to do, and either I'm going to change my mind because I learn new things, in which case I lied to you 6 months ago, or I'm not going to change my mind because I feel like I need to keep my promise, in which case I'm going to deliver the wrong thing. So that seems like a no-win scenario to choose between being a liar and an idiot. So what are we supposed to do? I ask lots of product managers all over the world. I run workshops on road mapping, and I always ask them to write a breakup letter with their existing roadmap process, their traditional way of doing roadmaps. And they have no trouble putting their heart into a Dear John or Dear Jane or Dear Roadmap letter. Here's one of my favorites. Dear Roadmap, I've been putting in so much energy to get this relationship working, but it feels like I only give and never get any value back from you. You're always out of date. There's no way to get all the information in and still make it readable. You're always about the solutions and not about the needs or the problems. You're never good enough for all my stakeholders. That's it. I'm going back to Microsoft Project. And I mean, I've always kind of hated Microsoft Project. So that was a real indictment for me when I heard that. I want to take you back in time a little bit to my first struggles with roadmaps many years ago. The first roadmap that I did, um, I worked on for weeks. I had tons of detail in it. You can see this familiar, probably sort of format of quarters and different swim lanes for different parts of the product, and lots of detail, lots of sort of technical detail, and even a key so that I could explain my acronyms so that I could get all the information into one slide, and a footnote. And if that wasn't enough detail, I even had pop-ups to explain some of the things in more detail. And I worked hard on this and I thought it was perfect. And I put it in front of my stakeholders inside the company. And I kind of got this reaction like, well, sure, I guess. Um, they really didn't know what to make of it. It was tons of detail, but there was no story to it. There was no life to it. There was no strategy visible in it. There was nothing there but just a list of various technical things that we planned to deliver with timeframes on them. And that wasn't really helping them understand what I thought was our strategy or how we were going to get there. So I kind of stepped away from roadmaps, honestly, for a while. I couldn't figure out how to do them right. I just decided, oh, I'm just going to go back to build, measure, learn. But I had this feeling that something was missing, that I hadn't found a way to express my strategy or what success looked like, but that it was still necessary. Here's a quote from a venture capitalist in the Boston area, Jeff Busgang, who I also interviewed for the book on product roadmaps, and a former product manager. And he said product roadmaps matter. For him, they are evidence that you have a strategy. And he's really basically saying, I'm not going to invest in your startup if I don't think you have a strategy. And your roadmap is your way of explaining that to me. So I went back to the drawing board and I said, okay, there has to be a better way. I need to have a roadmap. If I'm going to get investments, if I'm going to get my stakeholders on board, I need to have a statement of the roadmap, but I need to do it better. So I asked myself, well, what is a roadmap really? Is it really, like I did in that slide, a list of features and dates? I think maybe no. A roadmap is really not a release plan or a project plan or a bunch of dates and features. It's just not that sort of thing. It's something else. Let me give you a concrete real world example. So here's this company, Wadify. They're a US company and they're trying to bring technology to a traditionally low tech business, gyms, gyms where you can go and work out. Um, and they thought, as an enlightened 21st century company, that they should share their roadmap with their customers, the gym owners. And so they actually put it out on their website, and it looked like this. They had things on it in a nice, colorful style, like lead insights and Wadify Pulse and Wadify Rise, and they had dates on these things. And they thought, well, this will make for a really good way of connecting with our customers so they'll know what we're up to. And then they started to get feedback and questions from their customers about the roadmap on their website. And it was mostly confusion. It was mostly like, what is Wadify Rise? What's in Wadify Arena 2? And why is it late? So they had concentrated on the features and the dates, but that just raised more questions than it answered for the customers. So they didn't abandon the whole idea of sharing roadmaps with customers, but they changed their approach based on the feedback that they got. And they started saying, instead of dates, coming soon, with no dates. And they started providing on the back of these cards more detail about what problem each item was meant to solve for the customer. So if customers see it and they look and see what problem of theirs is being solved in the roadmap, that started to sound interesting to them, and that created a good dialogue with the customers about those needs, about, "Oh, yeah, I have that need. When is this coming? Can I get in on the beta program?" Or, "Actually, I think that this need that you have further down the list is more important to me than this one you have at the top of the list. Can we talk about priorities?" Really good conversations to have with your customer, sort of inviting them a little bit into the tent. So if we do that, though, if we remove the features and the dates, what is in the roadmap? What's, uh, what's left? Well, let's go back to the purpose of the roadmap. A roadmap, if it's not the same thing as a feature plan or a release plan, is a strategic communication tool. It is kind of a statement or a prototype statement, because it is subject to change, of your strategy, as my friend Janet Basto, CEO of ProdPad, says. It's a statement of intent and direction, but it's not extremely specific as to precise features and dates. That's for the release plan. If you think about it, it's less like a set of turn by turn directions and more like a GPS. Let's think about how do we use a GPS? We type in the destination for the GPS and it gives us directions, but it adjusts. If we run into traffic or weather or construction, or we just decide to stop off for pizza, it readjusts and gives us the best path to our ultimate destination, given the latest information. And that's the way a roadmap should work. Now, instead of it being literally a destination like we're going to Sacramento or something like that, it's a roadmap is a set of steps for how to reach and realize your vision for a future world where people are benefiting from your awesome product. So, in that way, a roadmap manages to outcomes, results, business results, happy customers, problems solved for customers. Whereas a project plan or a release plan or a program manages the outputs that hopefully correlate with those outcomes, hopefully drive those outcomes. But if you think about it, not only is the level of detail that's important in each of these two things different, one is strategy, the other is tactics. Um, Also, the time frames are different. Your roadmap should really reach out at least a year, maybe two, three, or even longer in the future to paint a picture of the path to ultimate success for your product. Whereas your release plan, I mean, let's be honest, as an industry, we're not good at predicting more than a few weeks out exactly what we're going to be able to ship, what the scope will be, and what the date will be. If we try to predict more than even a quarter, we're guessing and we're going to end up revising. So the release plan is a shorter term thing. It changes more frequently. It's very concrete in terms of features and dates. The roadmap is, well, what are the goals that those are in service of? So now you might be asking, well, what does this look like? A strategic roadmap. And I think the format is not really the most important thing. I've seen really good roadmaps as Kanban boards, as slide decks, as spreadsheets, stickies on a wall, 5-page memos. It doesn't really matter. The content is what matters. And um, I think there are 5 primary components that are necessary for a good roadmap, several of which are usually not found in a traditional style roadmap at all. These are the 5 right here: the product vision, the business objectives, the timeframes, the themes, and I'm going to spend a minute or two on themes because they're kind of the guts of the roadmap, the most important piece, and a disclaimer. Let's go through each of these 5 one at a time. The product vision, as I said, is how a future world will benefit from your product once it's out there and lots of people are using it, once it's fully successful and realized. It's not um, a detailed spec for the thing you're going to make. It's more about the customer and how they benefit. It's more about why does the product exist than the details of the product itself. Let me give you an example. Google as a company has an overall mission, as I'm sure you all know, to organize all the data in the world and make it accessible to everyone in a useful way. Now, that's the company level, right? But at the product level, they have multiple products. All of them have a similar vision statement that maps to the Google's ultimate mission as a company. The Chrome browser has a mission and a vision to provide a fast, simple, and secure browser for everyone to experience the modern web. YouTube is there to give everyone a voice, and Android is there for everyone to access the modern web wherever they are on the go. This is all focusing on the customer, in this case, just about everyone, and the value delivered to that customer through the product. And all of them are consistent in that way. Now, if that's the value to the customer, what about to the company? A roadmap, one of the things that's frequently left out of a roadmap is what are the business objectives? Why is the company investing this at all? What should be expected in terms of a return on the company's investment in the time and energy that the team spends making this product? It's about your OKRs, your objectives, what will be measurably different for your organization. And it might be revenue or profit or customers or retention or any of those kind of business metrics. And those really do play a part in your roadmap, in prioritizing the items on your roadmap for the most return on investment. My favorite kind of silly example of a roadmap that's oriented to business metrics is the one for Stellar. Stellar is a startup, or at least it was a few years ago, in the cryptocurrency business, and they used a metric. They tracked a metric in their roadmap called randos per week, and their goal was to drive up the number of randos per week. You might ask, well, what's a rando? And actually, that's the funny part is it's random people on the internet discussing cryptocurrency. Now, why would they track that? Stellar is a cryptocurrency exchange. So you can buy Ethereum with your Bitcoin or vice versa. And they're essentially measuring the success of their public relations efforts in getting more awareness for cryptocurrency, because more people being aware of it means more potential customers for them. They're expanding their addressable market. So they actually drove their roadmap off of both the desire to drive that number and the effects internally of that number. Let's talk about timeframes. Timeframes are controversial in roadmaps. You often feel like you get sucked into committing to dates for shipping things. Um, but I think actually that's not really helpful for most roadmaps. I like to have very broad timeframes to give you time to be able to build and ship, and tweak your way to. I'm sorry, build and test and learn and tweak your way to success. And it's difficult to be precise about a date when you take that approach, because you're constantly going to be learning and revising to reach your objectives. And if you take that approach, then setting a deadline fights against, or a committed date for shipping fights against your ability to learn. And so a lot of people have either gone to very broad quarterly roadmaps or half year roadmaps, or my favorite trend is what's called the now, next, later roadmap. This is a screenshot from ProdPad. They actually use this as their default view for roadmaps in their tool. And if you think about it, the now, next, later roadmap, which has no actual dates on it, answers 2 out of the 3 core roadmap questions that we all get. The first question is always, is it on the roadmap? And so you can see yes or no, it's on the roadmap. Second question is it coming soon? And you can see if it's in the now column, that means we're working on it right now. And so, yes, it's probably coming soon. If it's in the next column, well, those are the things we're going to work on after the now column things are done and the resources free up. So it's not immediately really soon, but it's, on its way. And if it's in the later column, there's really no commitment around a date. That's some people actually even call that the future column or the considering column. It's on the roadmap. We think we're going to do it, but we don't know when kind of thing. The only question it doesn't answer is exactly when. And as I said, exactly when fights against quality, fights against the success of a feature. If you are forced to commit to a date, ship what you can ship by that date, and then commit to a date for the next thing, you really can't go back and do the learning that you need to do to make the thing successful before you move on. So resist the pressure for specific dates. On the other hand, sometimes you need a date. Sometimes there's legal requirements or there's a contractual requirement. Like we all had to comply with GDPR a few years back, and we had to do it by a certain date. So there was a date on that, whether we liked it or not. And so you can maintain this now, next, later format, but have specific dates for specific items where needed, where absolutely required. The other thing I want to talk about is the disclaimer. Now, maybe you think that's just a throwaway. That's just the thing the lawyers make us put on the bottom of the slides about the roadmap, where we say, subject to change, don't make business decisions. I like to think of it as an opportunity to set up the right conversation with your stakeholders internally, or your board, or your customers, or whoever you're talking about the roadmap with, and say to them, hey, not only is the roadmap subject to change, but it's likely to change. And the way it changes is when I learn things, me who am in charge of the roadmap, when I learn things that change my mind, that give me new information or new perspective about what's really important to the success of my customers and my product and my business. And if you as a stakeholder have some of that information and you convince me that my priorities are out of order, for example, then I'm going to change the roadmap. Why wouldn't I? That's the right thing to do. That's the responsible thing to do. If I come to believe, thanks to you and other people giving me new information, that something I have down as priority number 10 should really be number one, I should update the roadmap. And I should explain to you and to other stakeholders why. So here's GitHub's roadmap. They actually have this style of disclaimer at the bottom. This is a public-facing roadmap. It's on their website, and it says, subject to change. I encourage you to do that on all your roadmaps and use it in the way that I described. So I promised we'd come around to themes. Themes are the guts of the roadmap, but they aren't a listing of features. They are the problems to be solved in the market for the customer in order to realize your product vision. They are the promises that you make to the customer to solve their problems, not to ship their features. So you could also think of it as market needs. You could also think of it as jobs to be done, but it's a way of expressing what you're trying to accomplish for the customer, not exactly how you're going to accomplish it. So it's not a group or a listing of features. Instead, it's those problems or needs or jobs to be done. This is a difficult mind shift for a lot of teams, so I really want to spend a minute on it. I want to think about it in terms of Super Mario Brothers, my a game I played for many years. If you think about it, the customer, if you think of them as Mario, maybe they're interested in a power-up. A power-up, maybe you could think of that as your product, right? You sell power-ups, and Mario wants to get the power-up, the flower in the middle of this cartoon. But really, Mario doesn't want the flower so much as he wants the result of consuming the flower. He wants to become Super Mario. He wants to be twice as big, twice as fast, invulnerable, and shoot fireballs so he can win the game more easily and defeat all the enemies and plow through the blocks. So really, your product and your product vision are about Super Mario. I like to say people don't buy your product, they buy a better version of themselves. And your product needs to enable that. So when you describe your product, I don't want you to describe it in terms of features and functions. It's got two pedals, it's got a yellow head with a red center. Um, I want you to describe it in terms of the benefit. Let me give you a real example, even on the roadmap. This is a real roadmap in Trello in the now, next, future format for an app that runs on your phone called Vempathy. And what it does is it uses the rear-facing camera and the motion sensor and the microphone to detect your emotions. And it uses AI to sort of read your emotions while you're looking at the screen. And it's a great testing tool for usability studies, for games, for ads, for movies, anything you can put in front of them on the phone, you can detect their reactions. So all of the items on this roadmap are actually problems to solve or jobs to be done for the researchers who use the tool or for some other stakeholder. Like, well, let me give you an example. Uh, Participant recruiting for research studies is a problem that researchers have. Now, you might say, well, the app is just there to do the study. It's not there to find you participants for your study. But if you think about it more broadly, if you think about your product as a solution, a holistic solution to the customer's problem, then actually getting participants for the study is a problem they need to solve in order to get value from your product, in order to get what they're really trying to use your product to do, which is to have a study and get the data and the insight from the study. So the problem statement right inside this ticket on the roadmap is UX researchers often struggle to get test participants for their studies. The desired outcome is every study should have the right type and number of participants. And critically, there are three different ideas here for how we might solve this problem for the customer. We might do a partnership, we might create our own tool, or we might integrate with a third party. And any one of those might work. And we're going to try and test each one in turn until one of them works. And when we measure successfully that we are getting all of the studies to have the number of people that they need, then we move on. Then that item is done, and not until. Maybe none of these three things will work, and we have to come up with a fourth idea. It's not about shipping, it's about results when you're talking about a proper roadmap. Let me give you another example. This is a real company that does online personal shoppers. You can get to them through WhatsApp. They're called Threads Styling. And they had a problem where they wanted to improve the payment experience for their clients, the people who are buying things with the personal shoppers. The problem statement is that clients need to be able to pay using one of three options: credit card, Apple Pay, or Alipay. But shoppers right now, the personal shopper needs to ask, what payment method do you want to use? And then they push them a unique URL that gives them a screen to put in their payment information. That takes a lot longer, an extra interaction, and it slows the process down, and it makes it so that maybe if the person gets distracted, the order never gets placed. So the proposed solution is one page that they can push without asking the question what payment method you want to use, that that offers the customer the option to choose right there on the page. So this is a different mindset for roadmaps. It's about managing to outcomes rather than outputs. A not great roadmap item would be, let's launch the next version of the thing. A better roadmap item would be, let's launch the next version of the thing in order to reach a goal, to increase signups, in this case, a business goal. But even better would be, let's just set a goal of increasing the number of signups by removing obstacles, a certain list of obstacles to sign up. What's great about this is if we are explicit about the goal, if we say, well, why would we ship the thing? Well, we think it will help us increase signups. Great. Now we're at a higher level of strategy discussion, and we can say, what's the best way to increase signups? Is it that there are obstacles in the sign-up process now, X and Y, that are addressed and improved in version 4.1? Great, that's probably the right solution. Or does version 4.1 not have those features or those removal of obstacles in it? And there's no point in shipping that until we fix these additional problems. And 4.1 is actually going to wait. We're going to delay it and be late on purpose to include fixes to the sign-up process that will increase the sign-ups, because that's the goal. We can't have that conversation unless we know the goal, unless our roadmap is more oriented to outcomes than outputs. So back to my original question, why do we as an industry too often make the wrong thing? I think it's because we commit too early to untested assumptions about which outputs will drive the results that we're looking for. This is harder. It's harder to put down a desired result for the customer or for the business in a roadmap, and because you don't necessarily know what's it going to take to achieve that result. But that's just reality. Reality is, as the Standish Group proved, we don't know in advance which features are going to drive behavior on the part of the customer. So let's not pretend that we do. Let's go back to build, measure, and learn, but let's make room for that in our roadmap and not just commit to dates and then move on. Let me show you a roadmap. I can't tell you exactly what company this is really from, but it's a real spreadsheet from a real team inside of a streaming music service that you have heard of from a few years ago. And they have a status for each item on their roadmap. One of three possible statuses: think it, ship it, and tweak it. Think it is we're doing the research and discovery and the design and deciding whether or not to move forward. Once it's beyond that stage, ship it is we're actually implementing it and getting it out the door. And then for a number of quarters afterward, we're in tweak it, which means we're collecting data about how customers are receiving this feature, using this feature, and what they think about it and their feedback to us. And we are tweaking the feature or the theme or whatever it is that we have shipped to improve the results from it. And you can see in the last column here on the right, they actually have measures, maybe they're key results for each feature. Either they want to increase CSAT, that's customer satisfaction, or the contact rate, or the cost per contact, or some other business metric that they want to see improved because they shipped the thing. And they probably are not going to get 100% of what they would want from that feature right away. And so you look at member chat, which is on the first row here, they're going to ship it in Q1, and they're going to keep tweaking it all the rest of that year and into the next year. They really have a long runway for these things. So in my mind, again, the roadmap is not about what you ship, it's about what you solve. And so roadmaps need to be about those problems to solve. Ellie Rijo, product manager for that Wodify company that I told you about, says we accept that we don't know which specific features we're going to build, and we give the teams the freedom within their objectives, within their outcome-oriented roadmap, to figure it out. Product management is not synonymous with project management. They're both needed. Project managers should manage the project plan. Product managers should manage the roadmap. The two should be tied together, different timeframes, different levels of granularity and strategy versus tactics. They're complementary, but they're different. This is really the main point that I wanted to leave you with. If you'd like to learn more about this approach, I can recommend my book, Product Roadmaps Relaunched. It's available on Amazon. I can't take sole credit for it. I wrote it with these guys. In particular, I recommend the paper version of the book. We worked really hard to get the layout to work as a reference book that you can leave open on your desk while you are working, and to make the layouts really hang together in terms of getting one concept on a pair of pages together for that purpose. And somehow that doesn't really translate into the Kindle version, even on my iPad that allows 2 pages to be shown at once. Also, if you'd like to follow along in more detail, I have a weekly, I call it a nano letter, one thing on product culture. Comes out every Thursday. One came out today. And it really is this short. It's really just 1 or 2 paragraphs trying to explain one idea that's important in product culture in the time it takes you to make or stand in line for coffee. Um, Somebody told me the other day it's the only newsletter they actually read because it's so short, it's quicker to just read it than to put it into my to read later folder of things that I never actually get around to reading. You can sign up on my website, productculture.org. Um, and that's all the slides that I have. I will stop sharing my screen and I would love to take questions.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Bruce. We found, or at least in my opinion, it was a very interesting talk. Is the first time I see jobs to be done and outcomes so clearly expressed, and also that disclaimer place so
Yeah,
so
it's really,
clearly spoken or explained.
thank you.
Yes. So it was extremely interesting. So something I found very interesting was that you didn't excluded this idea of having like a project plan or release plan for the short term.
Yeah.
That's also I found it very interesting, and I wonder if for some authors and some people who are very experienced in product roadmaps, they tend to say that you should have several different versions of
Mm.
product roadmap for different audiences.
Yep.
And what do you think about that?
That's a really important question. I I have a lot of stakeholders as a product manager, right? I have the marketing team, the sales team, the engineering team, the UX team, the board, the investors, maybe analysts, maybe customers. It goes on and on. So I could end up with 17 or 20 roadmaps, and that's a lot of work. Also, the risk in that is that I am not actually driving the alignment that I want on my strategy because I'm telling different stories to different people. Um, the way I prefer to do it is to say, I want to tell the same high level story about delivering value to customers and driving the business because we're delivering customer value to everyone. And so if let's say I wanted to do it in slides, and if I have a slide deck that is my roadmap, the first 3 to 5 slides are the same for everybody and for every audience. They cover the product vision, the business objectives, if it's an internal audience, the themes, the disclaimer, all those things that I described. And then maybe I have one additional slide in my deck for each of my different stakeholders. One slide for marketing, one slide for engineering, that layers on top of that same story the extra level of detail that they want, that they need. So I don't want to tell my customers exactly what features I think are going to solve for the themes in my roadmap because I might be wrong. We might change our minds and discover that feature A doesn't work to solve the problem. We're going to move to feature B. Um, but I can have that conversation with engineering. I can say, here's my priority list of possible features for each theme that we can now discuss. And that would be on slide number 6 of my 10 slide deck. And then when I'm talking to engineering, I show them the same first 5 slides that I show everybody and one more slide, slide 6. Slide 7 is for marketing. I only show that to the marketing team because that talks about what we're going to be able to demo at the next conference and how I think the themes translate into benefits that they can promote as a marketing team.
Wow, great. Thanks for your very complete and clear response. And we have a question from Laura. He asks, "What is an example of a great roadmap we can look at So,
I would take a look.
as you
Yeah,
mentioned, several companies who make roadmaps public. Perhaps
right.
you could have some other examples. Yeah, go ahead.
To see good practice at work in a roadmap you may already be somewhat familiar with, I would go to GitHub. They do a really good job of explaining their strategy. It's a little more detailed than I would ideally want, um, but it answers any question you could want asked. You could want to ask other than dates. They don't really have dates except for very near term things. Um, so I like that one as a good example. They're very clear about their strategy, their vision, and they break it down into a lot of detail. So don't learn to go as many layers down into detail from them, but do learn their framework. Um, Another one of my favorite examples, actually, in an unconventional format, is if you Google um, Tesla's roadmap to Mars. There is a video on YouTube that's, I think the total time is about an hour. It's a little bit of an investment of time, but it's Elon Musk himself describing their roadmap for how how SpaceX is going to enable humanity to become a multi-planet species by colonizing Mars. And it sounds like science fiction. And maybe it is. Maybe they will never achieve it. But if you follow along, his logic is very structured and very much along the problems to solve in the order to solve them in order to achieve a result. And his result that he's looking for is to make it cheap enough to go to Mars that an average American family could sell their house and afford a ticket to Mars, which is fascinating.
Wow, very interesting. It's kind of a storytelling in a roadmap.
That's right.
We'll take a look at that.
I just did a workshop this morning with a group of people, and I challenged them exactly to with that word. I said, "Sure, your roadmap is like a grid or a slide, right? But it needs to tell a story." So we practiced actually using the items on the roadmap to tell a story of delivering value to the customer.
So the roadmap is like an artifact to remember that storytelling that and also a place for the storytelling would trigger conversations. Oh,
That's right. That's
okay,
right.
so we have more questions from the
Great.
audience. Gemma says, "What is the biggest barrier to adapting a roadmap, and how should we try to overcome it?"
So the biggest barrier that I usually see when I introduce this sort of more modern style of roadmap is that there are people inside your organization who are very used to the old style of
Mhm.
features and dates. And they may they think they kind of feel like this style of roadmap is somehow cheating or it's somehow a trick that you're trying to get away without the traditional commitments to features and dates. Um, and so to bring those people along on the journey with you and get them to buy into your approach, what I like to do is to marry the old style with the new style. Marry the project plan where you have to satisfy the stakeholders with the roadmap. Most of the time, I think of them as two different documents, right? But suppose that you do the roadmap that I described, where you describe the themes and the business objectives. And then inside the themes, you say you have a list of likely features and projected dates. Not maybe for everything on the roadmap, but maybe for the things in your now column. Because you're far enough along, hopefully, on the now column that you have some visibility into what you actually will ship and when. Try not to get pulled into putting a date on everything or a feature on everything, but give them that much that they're used to seeing where you must in order to get their buy-in. But don't forget to start with the why, with the goal, with the business objectives and the theme. Don't forget to tie those two together all the time. And what that does is it constantly reminds your stakeholders why and gives them that context so they don't just shrug when they see your roadmap like people did when they saw my first roadmap. Also, and here's the really important bit, when inevitably you have to change the roadmap because a feature is not testing well with your customers, or you change your priorities, or something is taking longer than anticipated. You have been spending all the time training your stakeholders to look at the objectives, the outcomes, along with the outputs. So when you say, I am changing the outputs, you can say, I am changing them in order to better meet the outcomes. And they'll hopefully understand that when you say, I know I said I would have this feature by Tuesday, we're actually going to wait an extra week because early feedback from the users is that it's not quite ready. And so we're going to, in order to meet the goal, which was make users happy in some way, we're going to delay a week. Then you have a reason for the delay, not just, sorry, we're late, but we're trying to meet the goal.
Excellent. Thank you. We have a question from Christian in the audience. He asks, how would you approach your roadmap when you have to create it for a whole product suite, a suite or
Sweet.
portfolio of suite or portfolio of products? Thank you.
Right. So that is a different job. It has the same basic underlying principles, though. You are if it's a whole suite or a whole portfolio of many products, usually you are presenting a portfolio roadmap either to the whole development team so that all the teams know where they fit inside your portfolio, or to the executive team, the CEO, maybe the board, to explain the return on investment that you're making, the investments that you're making, and what you hope the return on those investments will be in business objectives. Rarely do you show a portfolio roadmap to customers. It's really an internal sort of tool most of the time. So the job there is to explain where you're investing. We are spending half of our resources on this new product because it's growing fast, and if we invest in it, it will grow even faster. And we're spending less resource on this other product or product line because it's mature and we don't need to spend more. We don't need to invest more here. We just need to retain the existing customers, and so on. And so it's the lens often for a portfolio roadmap is more about the business objectives, the investments that you're making, and less about the especially the features and functions. You just can't get down into that level. But it flips the lens from a focus on the customer to a focus on the business. Usually,
More related to the business impacts, that
correct.
the outcomes that produces the business impacts. Okay.
That's right.
Great, thank you. So we have a last question.
Mhm.
This is from Theresa. He says, uh, do you change, adjust your approach to roadmaps when creating a roadmap for a B2B product?
Good question. My background is mostly B2B. I work with B2C companies as well, and I have some experience in that area, but my approach to roadmaps has largely been driven originally from B2B and extended to B2C. Um, the In B2B, you actually spend more time talking to your customers about the roadmap than in B2C. In B2C, most of the time, think about Apple, they never tell us what their roadmap is because they're primarily a B2C company. Most B2C companies are like that. The roadmaps are internal and secret. Um, and so with B2B, though, you really want to focus even more on the customer value because you're going to go and you're going to talk to your customers about your roadmap and get their feedback on it. You're going to ask if you've understood their needs properly and if you have them in the proper order. Now, B2B enterprise with large customers is its own special challenge. And I've worked in those kinds of companies. I worked for Oracle for a while. And there you often have big customers and their salespeople really pressuring you for specific features on the roadmap. And I had that one time, actually. I made a presentation, a thematic, problem-oriented roadmap, no features, presentation to a group of systems integrators whose job it was to use our enterprise platform to build solutions for their customers. And I could tell one of the SIs was not satisfied with my thematic no features roadmap. He came to me at the bar after the presentation and demanded to know if his customer's favorite feature was going to be in the next release of our product. I mean, Spanish guy, and he was just like, I must know. He was practically throwing his glove on the floor. And when he made that big gesture, the whole bar went quiet. Because they all wanted to hear, oh, is the product manager going to answer the question? And I didn't. I said to him, I understand your customer's problem. They, like many other customers, they struggle with this problem. But there are several possible solutions to this problem, and I don't want to promise that one solution until we've tested it and tested it against other possible solutions. So I'm not going to answer your question yes or no right now, but and at this point, he kind of deflated and was disappointed that I didn't answer the question, and the room went back to their drinks. But I said, I'll get on the phone with you and your customer next week, and let's talk about what would look like a good solution to them. Let's verify my understanding of the problem from their point of view, and let's talk about the pros and the cons of different possible solutions. I'm not going to commit to anything on the phone with them, but I'm going to make them feel heard about their needs and why they like this particular solution. Or maybe when I tell them the 2 or 3 other things we're thinking, maybe they'll like them better. Let's find out.
Excellent. Oh, thanks a lot for this master session on roadmaps. We appreciate a lot your time and all the clarity of your explanations.
I'm glad you
Thank you
enjoyed
very
it.
much, Bruce.
It was a pleasure. It was a
Thank you.
pleasure. Feel free, anybody, to shoot me a note, Bruce at Product Culture, if you have further questions.
Thank you. Bye-bye.